As China has become increasingly enclosed in recent years, it's hard to tell if what's happening in China is real or fake. The 135th China Import and Export Fair, also known as the Canton Fair, kicked off on April 15, 2024. It has always been known as the barometer and weathervane of China's exports. To highlight the importance of the Canton Fair, Chinese Premier Li Qiang went to Guangdong to reiterate China's unswerving commitment to expanding its openness to the outside world at a high level and promoting free trade and convenient investment.
广交会是中国对外开放的窗口，充分展示我国新质生产力发展的最新成果。全球采购商不远万里来参加广交会，体现了对中国制造的信任。 对中国经济发展的信心。
China's official media has emphasized that the scale of this Canton Fair has reached a new high. The exhibition area is 30,000 square meters, and there are 680 participating international companies from 50 countries and regions. Among them, national companies related to the Belt and Road account for 64%. This shows that China's circle of friends and trade exchanges is getting larger, and the door to the outside world is opening wider. Is this true? On the X platform, a video was circulated presenting a different picture from the crowded scenes released by Chinese official media. The blogger's caption for this video is, "The Canton Fair is over." Another video from a Chinese social media platform showed that the Canton Fair, which started on April 15th, was empty and had very few customers. A blogger selling solar street lights and small solar system items wrote, "It's the second day of the fair at 10 a.m. We haven't seen any people yet. We are in Hall C." The video attracted a lot of attention, with Chinese netizens leaving comments and describing what they saw or felt. One echoed the same sentiment, saying, "No one is there. There are more exhibitors than visitors." One netizen responded by explaining, "Those who were hired to attend the fair on the first day of the fair have already finished their job." Someone asked, "How come so many people were seen on the TV?" One replied, "That was footage from before the epidemic." A netizen said, "I have attended the Canton Fair for more than 20 years. Nowadays there are few patrons at the Canton Fair, and basically they only come around lunchtime. It's not comparable to what it was before 2016. Someone else explained why there were even people at the Canton Fair these days. They thought they would have to pay 200 yuan or nearly $30 to get in. Ordinary people have to pay to get in. Now, one doesn't have to pay to get in and browse." One joked that the patrons were wearing high-tech stealth robes and couldn't be seen by ordinary people. As to what the real situation was like at the Canton Fair, the following report from Reuters can serve as a reference. On April 17th, Reuters reported that Wuhua John's TV factory used to require minimum orders in order to manage production efficiently. But given how dismal the current market is, any orders would be good. At the Canton Fair, Wu said his company's profit margin has dropped to a wafer-thin 0.5% from 2% some 3 to 4 years ago. He is a co-owner of a Guangdong-based factory and one of the many exporters fretting about business prospects. "The appliances we sell are cheap as cabbages." He added, "If this continues for another year or two, we will have to switch to another business." The report said Chinese exporters were also forced to cope with rising economic and political tensions between the US and China and a slowdown in global trade due to the war in Ukraine and the worsening Middle East crisis. Some exhibitors said business felt slowed down. Lois Zhang, the sales manager of a factory that produces speakers and microphones, said, "On the first day of the Canton Fair last year, I received more than 10 inquiries, but today I only received 3 business cards." The manager of a manufacturer of outdoor heaters in Jiangsu province said he doesn't hold out much hope for the European and North American markets, even though that's where most of his customers are concentrated. Mr. Fan, who asked to give his last name only, said, "The order from one of our big customers this year is 25% less than last year, and other customers haven't decided whether they want to continue to place orders." Mr. Fan said his customers are still reducing their inventories, and he hopes their orders will increase later this year. Pan Feng, a sales manager at a drum dryer manufacturer, said, "Both Biden and Trump give an unsettling feeling." In another Reuters article, regular Canton Fair exhibitor Chris Lin, who owns a lighting products factory in the eastern province of Zhejiang, spent tens of thousands of yuan to rent a booth this year, but he has no great expectations. Lin said, "Fewer and fewer buyers from Europe and the US have been coming to check our products in recent years. A big Western supermarket buyer used to send 5 to 8 people dressed in nice suits. I only saw 1 or 2 of them in recent years, and they were just looking around." Around 93,000 foreign buyers are expected to attend the 3-week-long fair, perusing the goods of 28,600 exhibitors selling everything from massage chairs and frying pans to garden ornaments, in booths covering a 1.5 million square meter space or 280 football fields. Some 22.3 billion worth of deals were signed at the last Canton Fair in October, up 2.8% compared to the April 2023 show, which was the first after 3 years of pandemic disruptions. That's still well below pre-COVID returns of around 30 billion. Before the Canton Fair began, Chenji Wu, a professor of finance at the University of Hong Kong School of Economics and Management, told Reuters that the key word for this year's Canton Fair would be low prices. He said, "Since domestic demand for goods within China is much lower than usual, and overcapacity is high across most industries, manufacturers have to cut their prices to achieve more exports." These Reuters reports tell a completely different story from what the Chinese official media is presenting. "We have launched more intelligent and energy-efficient products on overseas markets to attract more consumers. So far, we have over 400 customers from more than 100 countries and regions across the world who have appointments to visit our booth for business negotiations."
The quality right now is, I think, is at top level. All the innovative part is developed in China. That's why we are here. That's why we are growing our purchase in China, and we are happy to do it.
The Canton Fair reflects China's excess capacity problem, which has been a recent concern of the world as it impacts the globe. The latest data shows that both China's imports and exports contracted sharply in March, falling short of expectations. According to data released by China's General Administration of Customs on April 12, 2024, China's imports and exports in the first quarter totaled US $1.4313 trillion, an increase of 1.5% over the same period in 2023. Exports in March totaled US $500.81 billion, a year-on-year decline of 7.5%, which was the biggest drop since August 2023, and the growth rate dropped by 14.6 percentage points compared with that of the previous 2 months. Imports declined by 1.9% year-on-year, a drop of 5.4 percentage points. The dismal import and export figures undermine hopes for sustained growth in China's economy as it seeks to grow after the epidemic. Due to China's overcapacity, manufacturers with lower technical levels have fallen into price wars. In order to compete for market share, the prices of their products have been pushed lower and lower, and factories have been stuck in deflation for a long time. On the flip side, this also means that the pricing power of Chinese companies at home and abroad is weakening, and the pressure on profit margins is increasing. March industrial financial data due later in April will give more details. US and European countries have said that the Communist Party's strategic measures to strengthen and upgrade its manufacturing sector have exacerbated industrial overcapacity and driven down prices to levels where other economies cannot compete. Yellen visited China in early April. Even though Yellen is one of the few China-loving doves in Biden's cabinet, she has referred to Beijing's unfair economic practices, including alleged bullying of American and other foreign companies operating in China and distorting the global marketplace by subsidizing certain industries, leading to overcapacity.
And when the global market is flooded by artificially cheap Chinese products, the viability of American and other foreign firms is put into question. And we've seen this story before. Over a decade ago, massive PRC government support led to below-cost Chinese steel that flooded the global market and decimated industries across the world and in the United States. I've made clear that President Biden and I will not accept that reality again.
Yellen and other Biden administration officials have become increasingly concerned about the influx of China's excess electric cars, solar panels, semiconductors, and other commodities into the global market amid slumping demand in China's domestic market.
I am particularly worried about how China's enduring macroeconomic imbalances, namely its weak household consumption and business overinvestment, aggravated by large-scale government support in specific industrial sectors, will lead to significant risk to workers and businesses in the United States and the rest of the world. Our concerns are not U.S. concerns alone, but also reflect the views of our allies in Europe, in Japan, and in developing emerging markets, Mexico, India, among others. So this is a widespread set of concerns.
During her visit to China, Yellen also noted that China's strong support for manufacturing is related to domestic development goals, but that current capacity driven by government subsidies far exceeds domestic demand, as well as the capacity of other markets. She also warned Beijing against supporting Russia's war on Ukraine. She said companies that provide material support for Russia's war, including banks that help with deals to ship military supplies to Moscow, would be at risk of U.S. sanctions. Speaking on a CNN show on April 15th, when asked about the possibility of additional tariffs from the U.S., Yellen told CNN, "I'm not giving up on any possible response, but we do want to manage this relationship responsibly." Outside predictions speculate that measures including the possibility of imposing additional tariffs are aiming to prevent a large number of cheap Chinese goods from flooding into the U.S. market. Beijing has been investing heavily in manufacturing and has focused on new industries such as electric cars, batteries, and renewable energy in an attempt to find new sources of growth for the slowing economy. But China's economic growth is motivated by domestic demand, and many of these new industries are highly automated and don't provide nearly enough jobs. A Goldman Sachs 2023 analysis found that the three main industries prioritized by the CCP, electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, and renewable energy, account for only about 3.5% of China's GDP, and don't create enough jobs for the millions of college graduates and rural migrant workers who are struggling to make ends meet. Not to mention new workers, even those who are already working, are in danger of losing their jobs at any time. Scenes such as this one, in which migrant workers are demanding their wages, occur almost every day across China. On April 17th, workers gathered on the roof of a building in a coastal city in northern China and threatened to jump off the building in order to collect their wages after they were owed wages by a real estate project. In the manufacturing province of Guangdong, many workers are facing sudden unemployment. On April 17th, workers at a technology company in Shenzhen launched a strike to protest against the company's low wages that force workers to leave their jobs voluntarily. On April 15th to 16th, a two-day strike was called by employees at Modern Dental Equipment Company in Shenzhen. The company has resorted to disguised layoffs to avoid compensation, triggering strong protests from the employees. Founded in 1986, Modern Dental Group Limited is a listed company in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange and claims to be the world's leading supplier of prosthetic dental appliances. In a recent study, Mary Gallagher, a China expert at the University of Michigan, says that overcapacity is part of a broader Chinese Communist Party or CCP approach to governance, from the Great Leap Forward to China's real estate boom, which is characterized by a tendency for excess capacity and overachievement of goals. A new study published in mid-April by Germany's Kiel Institute for the World Economy suggests that Beijing heavily subsidizes domestic industry, particularly in green technologies such as electric cars or wind power. The total amount of Chinese subsidies is estimated to be 3 to 9 times higher than in any other OECD countries such as the US or Germany. According to new data analysis, one of the main beneficiaries is the electric vehicle manufacturer BYD, which has led to a significant expansion of BYD's technology and production capabilities and increasing competitiveness. Since China joined the WTO in 2001, low-cost, made-in-China goods have hit the global market time and again. China's economy has struggled in the aftermath of the COVID-19 outbreak, and the government has tried to boost exports to revitalize the economy. Chinese factories produce more cars, machinery, and consumer electronics than the domestic economy could absorb. Bolstered by cheap state loans, Chinese companies are supplying foreign markets with products they can't sell at home, and the sequel of Chinese bargains flooding the world is happening. According to the World Bank, China accounted for 31% of global manufacturing output and 14% of all merchandise exports in 2022. This compares to 20 years ago when China had less than 10% of the global share of manufacturing and less than 5% of exports. The Wall Street Journal reported on March 6 that some economists believe that the impact of Chinese goods on inflation was even greater than the first time 20 years ago. China's economy is slowing, and the deflationary effects of cheap Chinese-made goods won't be offset by China's demand for iron ore, coal, and other commodities. Unlike more than 2 decades ago, as geopolitical tensions have risen, Chinese companies are trying to avoid tariffs or import restrictions by not only expanding their manufacturing at home, but also establishing it overseas, as in the case of battery maker CATL, which produces most of its products at home but still builds factories overseas. Developed economies such as the US, Europe, and Japan don't want a repeat of the early 2000s when cheap Chinese goods led to the shutdown of many factories in those countries. In 2016, David Attor, an economics professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, wrote in an article that the US lost more than 2 million jobs between 1999 and 2011 due to Chinese imports, with manufacturers of furniture, toys, and clothing struggling to compete and workers struggling to find new jobs. Unlike the early 2000s, the Western world now sees China as a major economic competitor and geopolitical rival. As a result, the West is investing heavily in protecting its own industries, providing billions of dollars in support to sectors seen as strategic, and imposing or planning to impose tariffs on Chinese imports. G7 allies such as Canada, France, and Germany have expressed concern about Chinese exports. The European Union is considering whether electric cars made in China are unfairly subsidized by the Communist Party and should be subject to tariffs or other import restrictions. For his part, Trump, who is seeking to run for the US presidency, has floated the idea of imposing 60% or higher tariffs on Chinese imports. Brazil's President Lula has also voiced his concerns and recently launched a series of investigations into alleged dumping of steel and other industrial goods. Unlike Japan or South Korea, which have abandoned low-cost manufacturing in favor of higher value-added exports, Beijing is not only competing with other developed economies and high-end industries, but also hasn't given up on exports of low-cost products. Many economists believe that China's deflation may have the greatest impact on emerging markets, especially those that have significant trade relations with China. Our forecast is that some of the deflationary impact may be transferred to other parts of the world as Chinese exporters seek new markets in poorer countries. Some economies may see their emerging industries shrink in competition with Chinese bargains.